Glock Model 17 Gen 1. Let's check it out. In 1980, the Austrian military decided to replace their sidearm, and it was the Walther P38 from the World War II era. They were looking at a number of different guns. Gadsden Glock heard about the trials, had no experience whatsoever in firearms, and yet within 3 months he had designed the Glock Model 17. It won the trials hands down against 8 other competitors. And a lot of that had to do with the price, because it came in at a very reasonable cost. And it was named the P80. Right after that, they started offering this to the civilian markets as the Glock Model 17. It wasn't until 1986 that it began to be imported into the United States. And from 1986 to 1988, the Glock Gen 1 became one of America's most popular handguns. Now, this is not an original. Honestly, originals are very hard to get, and typically they're pretty beat up. Lipseys Outdoors, a major gun distributor, got together with Glock, and they've reintroduced what they call the Glock Model 17 Classic. Now, a few years ago, they did have a model that was the P80, and it was more based on the original Austrian sidearm. But this is the Glock 17 Gen 1. There are a lot of cool things about this handgun, and there are a couple of differences from the original Gen 1. But one of the big bonuses is you still get that Tupperware box with it. This is a great collector, but it's also a great shooter. And honestly, it's only about $20 more in price than your Glock 17 Gen 5. And we want to give a big thank you to our Patreon supporters for allowing us to go out and purchase this Glock Model 17 Gen 1 Classic. Now, typically I don't start out with the box, but because this is kind of a special package, it does come with a box, just a standard type box. It's really actually a pretty cool box. And it has a little tab right here to be able to pull it. It's magnetic. You open it up, you get your owner's manual, of course, and you get a certificate for authenticity. And this is just a historical reproduction signed by Gadsden Glock. And that's just pretty cool. This is a collectible type firearm if you want to do that. And then really what's cool is the Tupperware box, and that they brought that in. And of course you get your lock as well. There's also a diagram of the pistol and just some information about the Glock 17. Now we get the original Tupperware box. Glock went back and actually found the designs of this box and just recreated it. The original did not have this warning label on it on the front. And actually it's funny because they put it on the inside. This is called the Tupperware box, and it was kind of a lot of talk when this came out. But this typically was on the front of the box, and so I've seen some that this is separate. But anyway, there it is. And then we have the pistol, and it has this little section right here to hold it into place. I'll tell you guys, if you ever had one of those early Glocks, I mean, this brings back a lot of memories. Of course, you know, your magazines, you do get 2 magazines, and then of course you get the handgun, and you get a brush and a cleaning rod. This to me was a great addition. And one of the big things about this handgun is it was actually made in Austria. A lot of the US production is now down in Smyrna, Georgia. I've been down to their facility down there. It is awesome. But this particular gun is made in Austria. Now, before we get too far into the review, I just want to give a big thank you to Lipseys for putting this together. Again, it was a 3-year project putting all this, working with Glock very closely. bringing back the molds, bringing back a lot of these features that are long gone. And also with the help from Larry Vickers. And Larry really put a lot of input into this whole project. Down to just the Tupperware box. And I mean, this was a great touch. And guys, if you're a Glock fan like I am, you know, I've got 2 through 5, but the Gen 1s, there weren't a whole lot that came into the country. And so it's really nice to be able to get a Gen 1, only $20 more retail than your standard Gen 5. And bringing that to market, it is an exclusive through Lipseys, and if you want one, you have to go through their dealer network. This is really one of those classics that really rounds out your Glock collection. But it's also a great shooter. Now to get things started, let's go ahead and drop our 17-round magazine, check the chamber, and the gun is empty. Now we're going to be showing a number of different pistols, and they've all been safety checked. One of the big things about the Gen 1 is it had this texturing that wrapped all the way around the grip. And that is one of the things that denotes a Gen 1. Gen 2, and we're going to look at that in a minute, it already started with the different texturing that goes on the front and back strap. But with the Gen 1, it is all the way around. And I'll just be honest, guys, it has an excellent feel to it. It's just really a solid feel. Now, it's not as aggressive as the newer Glocks. And, you know, as time went on, people wanted that little bit more of aggressive feel to it. But this is a great feeling gun. Another thing you'll notice is that the back strap is more straight between the trigger guard and where your web of your hand is. It's pretty much the same as it is with all the Glocks. But right here, it gets a little bit thicker. So they trimmed that down and made that hump just a little more pronounced. It does have the standard trigger guard. The slide stop is the same. Your takedown levers are the same. But you will notice there is no place for an accessory rail. There's no Glock slot. And so that is one of the things about this handgun is it didn't have an accessory rail. Neither did the second generation. The finish on the slide is actually an NDLC coating, so it's not the original Tenifer finish. Problem with the Tenifer finish though is that when they were using it, there were some health hazards. And so Tenifer is actually banned in Europe. So this is not the Tenifer finish, but with that NDLC coating, that's a really excellent coating, and they have it in that kind of a matte finish that the original Glocks were in. Standard serrations, no front slide serrations. Now you notice the mag release is very small. That's the way they were actually up Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3. And you'll also notice this is a 1-pin system. It wasn't until they introduced 40 caliber that they needed that extra pin. But for 9mm, you only need the 1 pin here and the pin in the back strap that holds your trigger assembly in place. Slide stop is pretty much the same, even with the small gate. You know, your takedown levers are the same, and again, you can see where it's just smooth. Now, the original Glock 17 in Austria did not have this little plate. The US requires the frame to have a serial number, but in Europe, it's the slide that has to have the serial number. Here are the markings on the slide, Glock 17, Austria. And to the serial number on the barrel at the end, it says Gen 1. And so it also matches the serial number on the slide and on this little plate. Also, you have a flat extractor, which on the Gen 3, they moved it to have a little bump, and that was a loaded chamber indicator. Some of the early Gen 1s had a pencil barrel, and they did change it to the 14mm size barrel. And so this definitely has that. It would have just been too expensive to go back and reproduce the pencil barrels. And you're getting a better barrel. Of course, your standard Glock plastic sights with the front dot and with the gold post at the back. Also on the Gen 1s, there's no lanyard hole. And on the Gen 2 and above, they do have a hole right here for a lanyard. Now on the magazines, they were not drop free. And they would sometimes swell. In fact, I've had a couple. I think I've tossed most of those out. It does have a steel lining inside just to help retain the shape and also for the feed lips. This is definitely a Gen 5 magazine. It has both cuts, but it doesn't have the Gen 5 base. It has that standard Gen 3 base. And so it gives it that appearance, but yet you have a better magazine. Guys, this is a shooter. And so there are a few things they've done as far as safety factors or as far as functioning upgrades. You know, they've retained it in the Gen 1. But guys, when it comes to the trigger, you get your take up, hit a wall. This is one of their improved triggers. This is not the original trigger because it's not near as mushy as the originals. So that's definitely a bonus. Now with the Gen 1, it just had this peppled kind of texturing all the way throughout. It's not super aggressive. In fact, it's pretty smooth. But it does give you a little bit of texturing. It goes all the way around, completely around the grip. When it came to the Gen 2, you have that pebbling, but it's just in this section right here. And then we have texturing on either side, which is the pyramid shapes and serrations, and then just the pyramid shapes all the way down the front. This carried on to the Gen 3, except they added the finger grooves, but it's pretty much the same type texturing. And again, no accessory rail on the Gen 2. Now they did upgrade some of the parts inside. The recoil system, originally with the Gen 1, was a one-piece rail with a spring over it, kind of similar to your standard recoil spring that's not captive. So they changed the recoil system. There were some issues with it being drop safe, and so they also addressed that and sent out kits for people to install in their own firearms. It does have the flat extractor, and they did do a little bit of changes with the magazine. We really appreciate Fiocchi for sponsoring the ammo, all made in the USA, one of the #1 suppliers of ammunition in the country. Also, we love our little loaders. Makes loading these 17-round magazines a breeze. The Glock Gen 1 Classic with that really smooth kind of pebble type grip. You know, I've been out here shooting it quite a bit. We put about 500 rounds through it, and you know, this grip just feels good. I mean, I like the aggressive texturing too, but this is very shootable. I've even been shooting it next to my Model 47, which is a Gen 5. And while there is a difference, you still feel like you're shooting a Glock. All the controls are Glock. I mean, it's just a Glock 17. You know, I mean, there's not a lot to say when it comes to shooting it, except that the grip is a little bit different. The magazine release is definitely small, but you're going to get that with the Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3. If you're used to shooting Gen 3s, this is going to be easy. But of course, obviously, the big thing here is the nostalgia. If you're a Glock guy, if you really love Glocks and you want all the models, this is the best way to get a Gen 1. And as usual, no malfunctions. But here I have the Model 47, and I'm just going to shoot a few rounds to give you my thoughts on the grip difference. Definitely, you know, it has some texturing there where I feel like I've got a good grip on it. It definitely fits in your hand. I mean, the one thing is, the Glock Gen 1 came out in '86. You know, this is 2023. So, you know, there is a lot of improvements that have been done. But again, these are just improvements to help you be a little bit better. It tweaks the way you shoot. The front slide serrations, the light rail, I mean, you know, those things are additional benefits. But as far as shootability, you know, I think that the Glock Classic comes in really close. All right, we're going to disassemble the firearm because we want to look and see the interior. You're going to check the chamber. The gun is empty. Just like your standard Glock, point the gun in a safe direction, pull the trigger, that disables the striker. Pull back on your slide and pull down on your takedown tabs. And that's the same with all the Glocks. Now, with this particular model, it has a captive recoil spring and guide rod. In the original, they had a guide rod and the spring just fit over it. And so this was an upgrade, and I believe that came with the Gen 2, but they did include that with this handgun. And then we have our barrel. We're going to pull it right out. And again, this is your standard 14mm barrel, which was present in the later model Gen 1s. And you can see that this is just your standard Glock. In fact, the top half, it really looks identical. But when it comes to the frame, there are some changes. One of the things though, this one has been upgraded to be drop safe, but it still has that smaller locking block and it has the rails that come out. But overall, this is very similar to your original Gen 1. They've just had some changes that have been made just to make it perform better. Because guys, honestly, it took 3 months to put the Glock 17 together, and so I'm sure that they found different issues they needed to address. But guys, that's all you need to do to field strip, to reassemble. Just drop in your barrel. I mean, it's just like your standard Glocks, pretty much. There's a few differences here and there, but overall, it's a Glock. And we're going to test for function, and we're good to go. Now, of course, with the Tupperware box, they switched to the standard Glock box. And so this is a big upgrade over the others. And of course, you've got your Glock, you know, you open it up and you have your gun. They did away with that little trigger guard thing they had going on. And then you have your foam. So a big upgrade with this box, but this is still a cool box. So why buy a Gen 1 Classic? First off, it's just the nostalgia. And if you like Glocks, I mean, this is where it all started. And that's just a big plus. But also, honestly, these grips are excellent. I mean, they're not near as aggressive as most, but I mean, I didn't have any trouble with them. The Austrian police for many years used these, and American shooters, definitely with the upgrades, it gives you a little more texturing, but this is still a very shootable handgun. You want the accessory rail? Well, you're not going to get it. And of course, optics cuts. I mean, there's a lot of upgrades with the Gen 5 especially that, you know, you can do things with. But as far as just a basic solid gun, it's still a Glock. It performs like a Glock. And like I always say, I mean, the Glock is the AK-47 of the handgun world. A lot of it has to do with just how simple it is. And the original was very simple. I mean, a better magazine that comes with the commemorative version, a better recoil system. It has been upgraded to be drop safe. So it's just an excellent handgun. And whether you buy it to collect it or you buy it just to take it out and shoot it because you just want that Gen 1 experience, I mean, it's just a lot of fun. And the big thing is the price is coming in retail for $669. I'm seeing them for well under $600. When it comes to the standard Gen 5 Glock, they retail for $649. It's only a $20 difference. And you're getting that original Glock box, that original Glock frame system. And so it just kind of takes you back. But straight out, I mean, it's just a great gun. So guys, while this is still a Glock 17 Gen 1, it's still a Glock. Shoots like a Glock, handles like a Glock, and performs like a Glock. But each upgrade just makes it a better experience for the shooter overall. But this is still a very capable handgun. So guys, the gun that started it all, the Glock Model 17 Gen 1. And a lot of inspiration has come from the Glock polymer striker fire pistols, and Glock still goes strong even up to the Gen 5. But it's really cool to see one of these Gen 1s and kind of step back in time and realize that this is still a Glock 17 and it's a great gun. And again, a big thank you to our Patreon members for supporting us and giving us a chance to go out and buy really cool firearms to bring to you guys. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America, long live the Republic. So why buy a mock Glock? It's a limited edition, so once they're gone, okay. In 1980, the Australian, be strong, be of good courage. God bless America. Sneezing, cat sneezing. He had a business of injected molding. In 1980, the Austrian military decided to replace their firearm. In 1980,